Welcome to
Ping
Pong
Philosophy
with
Lisa.
Lisa Herzog is full professor and Aletta Jacobs Chair of Philosophy, Politics and Economics at the Faculty of Philosophy of the University of Groningen. You can learn more about her and her work in the description down below.
Thank you very much for being with us, Lisa.
Thanks
Good
for having
morning.
me.
Lisa, I want to go straight to the questions, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is, what is a philosophical position or idea you wish it were true, but in your view, it is not?
I wish anarchism was true in the sense that we could all live together without any institutions that have to use force.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case because there are lots of conflicts and not all human beings have good intentions all the time. And so painfully, I've come to see that anarchism doesn't seem to work.
Is there anything that you think it's close to anarchism that you still believe, okay, maybe that?
I think we could have very different institutions that are far more egalitarian and that have a more just distribution of the benefits and burdens of cooperation. But I think there would still have to be institutions that enforce the rules for that kind of society.
Thank you. That's great. That you still believe something close to that.
Well, I'm still hoping.
Yeah. Well, hope is good. Hope is good. Yeah. On what have you recently changed your minds?
So one thing that's maybe a bit meta, but
yeah,
I've been following all that's been going on in higher education and academia and the attacks of the Trump regime on
the Netherlands also
in the Netherlands, but not the same kinds of attacks. And as a European, for a long time, I found it very strange that Americans have universities that have sports teams and that financially depend on their sports teams.
Yeah.
But now in the current climate, I'm thinking, oh wow, those have an independent source of income. It depends on other factors on the market, but it's not depending on the government providing them with funds so much, and that gives them a kind of independence. So I've come to think maybe we should have, lots of diverse sources of funding for research and teaching to make it more resilient in the case of anti-democratic, anti-science attacks.
Okay. So you would like to import this model to Europe, or do you think that is in?
I'm not sure it's feasible in other countries, but I think we should think very hard, given the current backlash against democratic institutions, how we can make the academic sector, including philosophy, more resilient and protected better in case certain countries decline into authoritarianism.
Well, that's a very nice because it's very close to home. So, yeah. But I'm gonna turn back a little bit to the philosophical side and ask you, what is a philosophical position that you have cherished or defended for a long time and you still believe in it?
So to give you some background, I've also studied economics, and my research is very much on the relation between philosophy and economics.
Are you a PPE person?
Sort of, yes. Okay. Yes, I was director of a PPE center, and I really enjoy this interdisciplinary way of thinking. And one position that I would defend really very forcefully is the social nature of human beings. And that's important because lots of economic models implicitly assume that we are very atomistic. And even in certain strands of liberalism and political philosophy, you basically have a view where individuals are atoms and they want to maximize their own benefits or utility, as it's then called. But we don't think of them enough as embedded in social structures, seeking the recognition of others, and having lots of motives that are not financial, that have to do much more with their social environment. And we are shaped by traditions and habits from our social background. And I think lots of questions about justice cannot be answered very well if we assume human beings just to be atoms and we don't take the social embeddedness into account.
Right. That's very nice to hear that you. I mean, I also value that kind of position, so it's good to see.
Let's convince the economist.
Yeah. Now we have to do the hard job and turn this from philosophy to economics, but. It's nice to hear that. But now I'm going to switch a little bit gears, and I'm going to go to something like you was a philosophy educator. So what text do you think all philosophy students should read? And my text, it's open. It can be a book. It can be a paper. It can be a conference. Nowadays we have a lot of conferences online.
No, I find this a really hard question because there's so much interesting and good stuff out there. Can I give a slightly crazy answer?
Please give a slightly or even highly crazy answer.
So I think there is an opera that is very interesting for philosophers and that would probably be enjoyable for lots of PhD students to think about. It's called the Macropolis Affair, and it's about a woman who gets to live forever. But she gets very unhappy and she goes through different lives, but everything becomes meaningless for her. And so it raises very interesting questions about relation between mortality, how we use our time, and whether it's actually desirable to have an eternal life or not, and what it would mean for our social relations. And so that I think is a very nice, and the music is also great. so that is something very deep, but also, it has implications that are very concrete about how we lead our lives, what we value in our everyday routines.
So check your local opera company if they're...
I'm sure it's also available online somewhere, but the thought experiment behind it is really, I think, a good one.
Do you constantly find when you go to to any multimedia output like cinema, arts, or anything like that, do you end up analyzing it philosophically?
I can't switch off my philosopher's brain. So I sometimes just enjoy it, but I often think about the moral responsibilities and also the institutions. So I'm very interested in how to make human cooperation function better and with less force, less coercion, as we discussed earlier. And so I'm very interested in how cooperation can misfire, and lots of crime movies, for example, are interesting in that respect, and how people misunderstand each other and what kind of motives drive them. So the sort of anthropological side of things and what that means for responsibility and how we organize our cooperative institutions, that's something I find fascinating.
That's fantastic to hear. And it's the first time in the podcast that we have a strictly philosophical texts or something recommended, so...
Oh, well, in that case... But there are also, of course, lots of great philosophical texts. I'm not saying you should only go for opera.
But as you said, it's for interest, especially for you said, for PhD students and grad students to also look at other stuff as philosophy. So
I think of philosophy as the human activity of trying to make sense of things in a very broad sense. And so for me, lots of artistic outputs are at least partly philosophical. I don't want to reduce them to that. But I don't think philosophy is only what happens in philosophy classrooms and gets written down in philosophy books. There's a lot of philosophy in everyday life and conversations, and I think as professional philosophers, our privilege is that we get more time to read up and to think things through. But I like the dialogue with society, with the arts, and all this very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was great to have that kind of answer. But now I want to switch it again. Bring you back to philosophy, and some people have had problems answering this one, so it's okay, but who's your favorite living philosopher?
That's also difficult, and there are lots of great people out there, but one that I'm a big fan of is Elizabeth Anderson, who is an American pragmatist, both philosopher of science and political philosopher, and she just has a fantastic way of putting her finger on really important topics, and she doesn't shy away from the complexities. And she's also very interested in the stuff that I'm interested in, so philosophy of economics, philosophy of work, what is value, but also always with a feminist perspective that I also find very important on these things. And so I learn a lot from her, and I find it just fantastic how she always moves to new, interesting topics.
Shout out to Professor Anderson, I guess. And, what is an area outside philosophy? I mean, you're also from economics, so I think we can kind of foresee the answer to this, but what is an area outside philosophy that you think philosophers should engage with more?
Well, you're suggesting I would say economics now, but I actually think that's a bit dangerous if you mean the model world that economists have built. And I think...
so not go blindly into economics.
Don't go blindly. If you go and interact with economists and read economic texts or studies, you need to be very much aware of the methodological pitfalls. So I actually think that qualitative social inquiry is very important for getting a better grip than you get in the modeling worlds on the social reality out there. So I'm a big fan of reading anthropology, fieldwork, qualitative social research that really gives you the perspective of other people on lots of issues like justice in healthcare, for example. How can you think about this if you don't? That's not my area.
Yeah, that is great. But now I have to bring you a little bit to some your opinions. So, professional philosopher, but it's just like lighter-hearted opinions. Like, you've been in Munich, in Oxford, also you were in Switzerland, St. Gallen, in Leuven, and in the States for a while. But where have you found that you are the coziest with respect to the academic canon?
Well, this may sound a bit cheesy, but I'm actually a big fan of my own faculty in Groningen, and I'm in Groningen because of that faculty. It's really an intellectual community, and I've been in lots of places where philosophers from different areas or from different paradigms, continental versus analytic, whatever, did not talk to each other, or had fights, or even stuff like the professors telling their PhD students not to talk to other people because it would muddle their thinking or whatever. And I hate this. I think,
please don't do it.
So I think, we have lots of interesting approaches and contributions, and we should learn from each other. And what we try to do in Groningen is really have this dialogue across the different subfields of philosophy. And that's something that I really cherish a lot. We are under pressure as a faculty, and I hope we can stay independent and keep up that intellectual community. But no, I love it.
Okay. Quick question. When was the first time you included a text written by you in a course you taught?
I don't think I ever did, actually. Maybe as sort of secondary literature and additional stuff. There's one text I wrote together with Bernardo Sacco that gets read quite a lot, which is on an ethnographic sensibility in normative political theory. So that's about this connection with qualitative social research. And in a way, I do recommend it to people, also PhD students and so on. But in my own teaching, sometimes I teach classics, and then of course I'm not one of them. But I also think it's sort of, I feel uncomfortable presenting my own text, so I haven't really done this a lot. No, that's...
Okay, but, but at least secondary literature as included. Do you think do you feel good about that?
People ask me about it, so I might have just as well put it into the syllabus. Yeah. But there's so much good literature out there, so and they get me as a person anyway, so why need to make them read my text?
Yeah, okay. That's bad. Well, and now the conference season is ending. Like, I'm just wondering, where do you think the best academic events are held?
So I'm a bit of a conference hopper. I don't have one that I would attend every year on a very regular basis. There are some where I go more frequently than others. And for me, it's very much about the kind of conversations you can have at a conference. So it's about the sessions, but also what happens in the coffee breaks and the dinners and lunches and so on. And I like it best when you really learn about new perspectives. And sometimes when I'm at conferences that are very close to my own home turf, I feel like, I know these views, and you're moving it a little bit further. So I actually like to dip my foot a bit into conferences where there's also some other stuff and see a little bit what's going on, and sort of not completely so far away that I say, look, interesting, but doesn't connect in any way to what I'm doing. So getting that distance right between the conference themes and the speakers there and my own interests at a certain moment in time, that for me makes a huge difference. So and that's something that I would also recommend to people, to not only look at always the same crowds, but sort of from time to time also go to more unfamiliar conferences and themes. But I cannot recommend the one, because it depends it depends even on the weather and the mood people are in, and lots of contingencies.
So what do you think about it?
Well, here we were not lucky with the weather, but that kept people together. That's also nice, because if you have a conference in a big city, there's a risk that people just go out and go sightseeing. And Turin has a lot to offer in that respect. So the bad weather keeps people in one building. That's maybe also an advantage.
Oh, well. And then the last question, because I need to ask you this, but you recently helped map this concept of sustainable work.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you think the concept of sustainable work is important.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try. So
in less than 1 minute. No. Take your time, please.
So I think what's interesting is that in public discourse, I mean, it's changing in the US, but in lots of countries, people have sort of accepted that sustainability is important. So you cannot be openly against sustainability. Of course, you can still try to be against concrete proposal and so on. But there is a certain power in using the language of sustainability. And when you look at policy documents, and I collaborated with Benedikt Zimmermann, a sociologist, in this project, you get lots of nice words, green jobs and transition and what have you. But the question is, do they really cover what we could mean if we think through the concept of sustainable work from a philosophical perspective? And then you see that they often only cover one of several dimensions. And I think there are a couple of things, I'm not sure I get them all right now from the top of my head, but for example, you want to take into account both paid and unpaid work, because a lot of unpaid work in society is not part of the discourse on work. And that's something I'm also trying to change and get more of the feminist stuff on unpaid work into the mainstream of philosophy of work. Another consideration is that you want to get a global perspective, because what you see at the moment is that lots of dirty jobs that use a lot of energy or that are exploiting nature or exploiting human beings, they get transferred into other countries where the standards seem to be lower or living costs are lower or whatever. So there's the Western countries, they want to look green, and then they externalize the negative stuff to other countries. And that even matters for how you calculate the CO2 emissions. So if you have the stuff produced in China and then imported back, whose emissions are those actually? So that it's very important to have the systemic view. And it's also very important, and that's ultimately the punchline of our paper. You cannot think about the notion of sustainable work as just something that will just happen on its own in the current structures. It's a very political notion, because you need to ask the question, well, what's sustainability, for whom, and who decides? And different dimensions of sustainability can be in tension, like CO2 emissions and biodiversity can pull in different directions. And so who really has the decision power to say that's sustainable work and that isn't? And our argument is that these discussions need to be had by the people who do the jobs themselves. So we connected to the whole discussion about democratizing work, democratizing the economy, because otherwise the market cannot tell us what sustainable work is. We need that to be a matter of democratic deliberation.
Okay. But thank you very much for being in philosophy. You already gave your talk yesterday. I hope you had a great time here at CIFA, and I hope to catch you in the next one.
Thank you. So, enjoy the rest of the conference here.
Thank you. And
thank you for
bye-bye
the
to
help.
our viewers.
Hello there, I'm Pablo. I'm the host of Ping Pong Philosophy. Thank you for watching or listening until the end. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember that you can like and subscribe to keep updated with everything we do here. Until next time.